So here I am once again. For those who have, oh, maybe I put it in the wrong place. Are you hearing this? Yeah? Okay. Those who are new to this, I just want to tell you, I chose this specific text written by Maitreya. I don't know whether we should even call it written, because the concept written is something so human and something so mundane. Oh, Professor, you are here. This is not good. You are going to make me nervous. Okay. But anyway, it's a very important text that in the Tibetan Buddhist study tradition, this is one of the most important texts. It's under no way we are going to go through each stanzas. I think teaching in stanzas, word by word, is kind of a very Indian old tradition, which later got adapted by Tibetan. I think, of course, if you have time and if you have the willingness, it must have its own value and virtue. But for many of us, probably this is also not that necessary. Well, I don't know, I shouldn't really say not necessary, but maybe it is important for many of us to have a general picture. And then, if you do have some, if you do, I don't know, if you get inspired, then probably you can do the in-depth studies. This is a Mahayana text, I should tell you. And this is a Shastra. In other words, it is a commentary to Buddha's teachings. But I like to say this. And many of you have heard me telling this in the past, so it will be a repetition. Culture, language, and the tradition have always hijacked the wisdom of the Buddha. It's kind of unfortunate, but kind of also no way out. We are human beings, and as a human being, you know, we are not so good. We may think we are good, but we are not so good. We have destroyed our world. We are not contributing, not at all, actually, not even one bit. Even the bees are doing much better than us. We actually not only not contribute, we actually destroy systematically, and we are so eager. And then we may think we are so sophisticated, but we have so many vague tools, such as language. Our language is actually very, very vague. And there's a lot of assumptions. And there's a lot of generalization. I know a lot of people sort of look down at generalization, but that's the only way we can talk and think. We just don't have the capacity to not generalize. Some people probably do a little bit more than the other. That's about it. And this has always been a problem. And I said this is a problem because culture, language, tradition, they're usually quite attractive, and they're also tangible, they're doable, so to speak. They're photographable, they're, I don't know, noticeable, they're remarkable. And then the wisdom of the Buddha, or the teaching, the truth that is being taught in the sutras and the shastras, the real sort of the absolute teachings, they're not photographable, they're not imaginable. But you see, even as I say this, even when I say this, that the truth is unthinkable, inconceivable, automatically, immediately, we think, oh, something holy, something mystical, something mythical. We just can't help it. We have to categorize it like that. Oh, so we are now so the Buddha's teaching or the Buddha's wisdom is something mysterious, something mythical, mysterious, something beyond us. End up categorizing within the basket of, like supernatural power, sort of heavenly, I don't know, transcendental stuff. But the thing is, it's not really like that. If you have the time and energy to go through the in-depth study on shastras such as Mahayana Sutra, you will know that the truth that Buddha taught, they are just ridiculously simple. It's so simple that how can we miss it? It's just incredible that we miss it. But as I said, we are not so good and we are not so smart. We invent language, we invent values, and we get so entangled with it. I was saying it is kind of unfortunate and sad that this has happened because I don't know, it just popped in my mind, so I will just express this. For instance, I was just telling this last night to a bunch of friends, like concept of WabiSabi, the Japanese. That's so deeply, deeply rooted to the wisdom of the Buddha. But now most of the young generation Japanese, they don't even know where it came from. Or The concept of WabiSabi is already corrupted and manipulated in many different ways, so that only like Kenzo Yamamoto or what? Issey Miyake. Only so when you think about WabiSabi, you think in terms of Issey Miyake or what? Kenzo, whatever, the fashion designers. Or if you are slightly in a better mood, when you think about WabiSabi, you think in terms of a Japanese flower arrangement or a Japanese restaurant that has minimalist painting. That's what you think about, isn't it? So this is so sad. Because what we are talking here is like imperfection is a beautiful. That's one of the element of the WabiSabi, isn't it? Imperfect, the beauty of imperfection. Things are imperfect, like certain things that are imperfect, like a crumbled tissue paper sitting on a table. If you know how to look at it, it's beautiful. It's incredibly beautiful, unthinkably beautiful. And where does that come from? That's actually deeply rooted into texts like this. But that wisdom got lost, and then the sort of a partial sort of a technique is used, not even as Buddhism. And one of the elements of the WabiSabi is temporary is beautiful, right? That's another one. Anything that is temporary, that is beautiful. Like, what was it? The sakura season, what is it called? What is it called? Cherry blossom season. Imagine you have cherry blossom throughout the whole year. Nobody's going to go there and look at it. But just because it lasts only 10 days, it's like so beautiful. Temporariness. And this is again deeply, deeply rooted in the Buddhist philosophy of impermanence. But nowadays, the moment we talk, and I think a big blame also has to fall on teachers like myself. So the Buddhism, when it is taught or, I don't know, put into practice, immediately the idea is, oh, Buddhists, the, sort of bleak, dark, people who talk about death, people who talk about impermanence, people who tell you not to enjoy life, people who tell you to go to caves, shave head, and even people who tell you simple things like sit. You try to tell that to a kid, sit. Teenager, the last thing they want to hear is sit. But this is what the Buddhists do. So all the teenagers keep growing up thinking, oh, Buddhism means I can't eat meat, I can't drink alcohol, and I have to sit. This is the last thing I want to do. So this is why culture, tradition, and language hijacking Buddhism is so unfortunate. It is. It's really, we are losing a lot. This text is so relevant to now, this age. Yes, the language may be archaic, language may be, we are talking about the 6th century. Asanga, 6th century? I have to refer to you. 6th. 4th. Okay. 4th century. We are talking about the 4th century text. So, yes, some of the examples and, like analogies and maybe archaic, old, and also very India. There's too many lotuses going on here. Lotuses, ornament, alamkara, the ornament. Indians love ornament. I heard that just state of Tamil Nadu has 700 nose ring. different kinds. So, the flowery language, you understand? So this may be, I don't want you to get too sort of put off by some of these, because this is, that's how it used to be, and this come from India. But beneath all that, there's so much wisdom that's more relevant now than ever. I was reading, I'm sure some of you have read this. I was reading some books, and there's people are saying that, many scientists and many thinkers are saying that, the traditional challenges of the world doesn't exist anymore. Or maybe even if it does exist, it's very little. Like, like Singapore doesn't have to worry too much about Malaysians invading Singapore. You understand? Like war. That's how it used to be 100 years ago. You can't be sure somebody would invade you, take over. So that's sort of more or less. I'm not saying that the people have suddenly become peaceful and peace-loving. I'm not saying that. It's just that people have become more selfish and more selfish and slightly worldly more smart. So, war costs, and if there is a war happens between two countries, many people have to lose, many people have to miss Game of Thrones episodes. Who wants to do that? No. we have to catch up that Game of Thrones. There's too much, fun. Then we are told that famine used to be one of the biggest problems. That I'm sure there are a few pockets here and there on Earth. There are people who are starving to death, but by and large, more or less, even in Nepal, you can drink kiwi juice from New Zealand. That's quite impressive. Even in Nepal, you can drink and eat Singaporean products. And then what? Plague is another one that we are supposed to have had so much problem. But like Europe had like millions of people died because of plague. Not so much now. Medical system is improved a lot. So much, like amazing scientific advancement. But now the modern thinkers are saying that our 21st century and the 22nd century problem is the problem of identity, existentialism, right? Existentialist angst, I think it's called. The Germans call it. Like who we are. Who am I? What am I doing here? Why like that, like the existential, identity. And I think this is so evident. The moment, even if you go to shopping mall, you can tell almost everything is something to do with identity. Prada, just everything. Hair dyeing, hairstyle, colors of lipsticks. It doesn't matter. The bling shoes. Everything is to do with identity. And it is so funny. It's so conflicting. Because the human being wishes to be special. So everybody wants to have a special color, special shape, special cuts. But then human beings are so afraid to be different also. Everybody is more or less so boringly dressed. I'm sorry to say this, but T-shirt is T-shirt, your shirt, and it's just nothing special. You go to any department, it's just everybody's doing the same thing. It's kind of much nicer when you go to like Marrakesh. There are people with a turban. There are people, turning up on a camel. Now that is interesting, isn't it? Now if you do that here, and then, many of Asians also have this Stockholm syndrome, right? Stockholm syndrome. You have to fit in to a certain values, and many times these values are pushed and imposed upon you by your your masters, I should say. Just I'll keep quiet now about this. Identity. Now, so people are saying that you can actually, now the medical system and all of this is so good, you can actually in about in maybe very short time, you can actually be able to live 200-300 years. But there are more people killing themselves because nobody wants to live that long. It's painful to, it's so painful to keep on knowing things. Sometimes, have you even imagined, sometimes it's just so, this table, what we envy this table. This table doesn't have to think about the bills to pay. This table doesn't think about, oh, I am smaller than that table. Or this table doesn't need to make schedules. Just the phenomena of schedule. You should really think, it's terrible. Like if you booked a massage 5 p.m. today, that's it. Till 5 p.m. you will be maneuvering your life according to that massage, which is supposedly to, lesser your stress. These subtle schedules are stressing you out. All these things. So anyway, identity is going to be our biggest problem. It is already. Teenagers are cutting themselves. Teenagers don't know. The kids don't know what, So I think this is where Buddha's teachings, because Buddha's teachings really, really fundamentally is about, identity. I mean, to be very, more directly speaking, identity less. That's what Buddha's teachings is about. Not needing to entangle with this problem of identity, because the identity is just an illusion. So I think if any one of you are wondering why we even study this kind of classical Buddhist texts, and in this day and age, I'm saying it has so much relevance, probably now more than ever. Okay. Okay, let's just dwell on identity and then talk about this. Okay, identity, self, me, I. What is this? if we really analyze, you don't find anything that is tangible, I don't know, photographable, substantially or truly existing nature, isn't it? You can't really find. Sometimes it's your toes, that's yourself, when it gets knocked on something. Sometimes it's your heart, sometimes it's your feeling, I don't know. Sometimes it's the concept, it's the nation, I don't know. There is no concrete, tangible, truly existing thing that you can call it identity, self. At the same time, you cannot say it doesn't exist. It's there. It's actually the most powerful thing. This self is the driving force, the wants and needs and the distinctions that is created by this self is driving the world. So there is a paradoxy here. Can you understand? There's a paradoxy of it's there, but also it's not there. It's not there, but it's there. This paradoxy is, you can say, is the subject of the main subject of Buddhist philosophy. You can say, you can really talk up, you can really, what do you call it, simplify. You can say that Buddhism is really a philosophical study that studies the paradoxy of life. I'm using the word paradoxy right now for the sake of understanding, just to illustrate a little bit. That I think more traditional way of using the language, I mean, a more traditional term is non-duality. But just so that we can communicate, paradoxy. Okay, so it exists, but it's also not exists. This is throughout all the Buddha's teaching. In fact, not only paradoxy. Paradoxy sounds like we are talking about the two things, right? In Buddhism, sometimes, I don't know, we have to invent an English word now. Paradoxy, two things, right? Dual. And sometimes in Buddhism, four things that are confusing. Sometimes 8, sometimes 16, sometimes like, I don't know, 24 or something like that. There is actually mention of that in the sutras and the shastras. For instance, I'll give you one for those who are quite familiar with the Mahayana Buddhist text called Heart Sutra. Form is emptiness. Did Buddha stop everything there? You know, form is emptiness. Okay, finished. Then it's not good. Right? Immediately after form is emptiness, he said completely the opposite. Emptiness is form. See, paradoxy. So not just paradoxy of two kinds. From he actually had to teach the third and the fourth one, which is form is not other than the emptiness, and emptiness is not other than the form. Actually, these two are really sophisticated. It's a really complex, vast study on the other two, which most of the Buddhist philosophy students don't even reach there. I don't know, somehow. Okay, first of all, general people's idea of Buddhism is something like this. They don't eat meat. I think they sit. Historically, they have been kind of non-violent, peaceful, kind of. That's about it. Not so bad, not so bad. It's okay. And then someone who studies Buddhism a little bit, especially Sharvakayana or Mahayana, then they're, Buddhism. Those people who talks about emptiness, right? Selflessness, emptiness, selflessness. That's it. That's majority of the people's idea of Buddhism is this. Those people, loving, peaceful, or those people who study emptiness, selflessness. They're only talking about the first one, right? Form is emptiness. Most of them, they don't think about the second. Hardly anyone think about the third and the fourth. Hardly. What is this text? Actually, not only this text, Maitreya has 5 important texts. This is one of them. Maitreya's text is Shastra, as I told you, is a commentary. Commentary on what? Commentary on not the first one, it's the second one. Okay? Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. This is where Maitreya is so good at explaining. Okay, now again, going back to the base. What is such a big deal with all this? What is it? What is there in it for me? If you can understand the paradox of life, if you can understand how things are there but also not there at the same time, your attitude towards this, your attitude towards something that is there but also not there changes. For instance, again, this is overly used example, but I think it's the best one. When you see rainbow, what do? Oh, what a beautiful rainbow. You don't go there with a chainsaw to cut it in case you can keep it. You don't. You enjoy, beautiful rainbow. You can even take a selfie. But you also know it's not there in reality. It's just a temporary thing. All cause and conditions are there, and then there's a beautiful rainbow. Not just actually rainbow. Movies, Game of Thrones. We can get engaged, we can get sad when your hero is dead. I don't know, anybody gets killed? I've never went past episode 1 because no time, and after a while I don't even know who is who. Anyway, this, you understand, Game of Thrones, engaging, really, really beautiful, and things are happening. Okay, your bladder calling, just pause and go to the toilet. You don't make a big deal. Even if you can't continue watching, it doesn't really matter. It's not really life and death situation. It's a movie anyway, after all. You can always catch up. The attitude. If you know something is there, but it's also not there, your attitude changes to this particular thing, like a rainbow, like a movie. This is what happens when you can see everything is there, but also not there at the same time. Then, with that in mind, if you go to a department store, such as Singapore, what is it? Tech. What's this department store called? Aren't we in a Suntech? With this attitude and with this attitude firmly grounded, and you really habituate yourself, shopping, parenting, shopping, career, pension plan, home building. It changes. You know, when you look at the rainbow, and when you are not going there with a chainsaw, that's called liberation, do you know? Because the rainbow has, because the knowledge, the truth that it's there but it's not there, has liberated you from going there with a chainsaw. So, informations that you find in this text are very relevant. Because you have to remember, Buddhism emphasizes so much more on wisdom than the rest. I would like to reach to a point where people tell me people value Buddhist. You know, people say, oh, he's a good Buddhist. He doesn't eat meat, he doesn't drink, he prays 2 hours a day. I don't know, he's really kind and he builds a lot of hospitals, he donates his money to here and there. Okay, so that's how we normally sort of value. I like to hear people saying, oh, he's a good Buddhist. You know, he goes around and has this attitude that things are there, but it's also not there. That would be really, really good. That would be really, really good. But chances of valuing Buddhism and Buddhists this way is difficult. Because as I said, remember, wisdom is not photographable. It's not imaginable. It's not remarkable. It's the best thing we can do is talk about it, which we are doing now. Okay, I believe that we are going to do from the 3rd chapter. Is it the 3rd chapter? We finished? Are you sure? Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. But as I said, we are not going to go through stanzas. And I believe that for those who are speaking Chinese, reading Chinese, this sutra, this shastra is translated into Chinese. So there is, I think, a lot of document supporting this if you want to further explore. Okay, refuge. It's a maybe the refuge, English word refuge, is not doing the justice. Then there's also this thing, as we have been speaking earlier, culture and the tradition and the habit sort of hijacking the real sort of the fundamental teaching or the wisdom. That happens a lot even in the refuge case. And with understandably also. For instance, one of the most common thing, have you taken refuge? Right? That's the thing that we get asked. Have you taken refuge? You must take refuge. We don't know what that means. Somehow it is something to do with like a Buddhist baptizing. I have a feeling this is what people think. And the Buddhist masters have not really sort of opposed that for good reason, because you have to somehow start anyway. So I think most of the time people think about taking refuge, then it involves some kind of a ceremony. It involves at least two people, one that is giving the refuge and one that is taking the refuge. And I guess in your mind also it involves taking an oath, like some sort of enrollment. Like, okay, I'm pledging this, I'm going to do this. Yeah. And then this is why I don't like the word refuge, because it really reflects hierarchy a lot. And this sort of contradicts a little bit with Buddha's one of the most important statements, you are your own master, who else is your master, so on and so forth, remember? So the word refuge, now we will be using this, but I just want to tell you that it's not the most, probably it's not the most, what do you call it? Correct. What is the word gachami, Professor Skilling? Gachami. I go. Gachami, of course. In Pali and Sanskrit both, right? I go. I like that. I go. I go to Buddha. I go. It's important that because this is basically what this part is talking about. But ceremony helps. Bowing down, cutting a little bit of your hair, getting a name, all these sort of helps us who likes this kind of thing, tangible things, holdable, tangible, photographable things. We like these things. So anyway, we will use the word refuge. What triggers you to take refuge? Mainly three, okay, generally three causes. Fear and admiration and compassion. And fear, when we talk about fear, we have also different kinds of fear. Just for the sake of understanding, I will call it kindergarten level of fear, and I don't know, high school level of fear, and I don't know, like a highest level of highest fear, highest or most profound. So the kindergarten level of fear is for the, okay, we take refuge to something, like, let's say, you are afraid of, fear, afraid of getting wet in the rain. So you take refuge under an umbrella. It's like this. You are afraid of hell. So you want to take refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, or a God. Or mundane, you have a health problem, you have a prosperity problem, you have a relationship problem, and you are afraid that you will lose your, I don't know, friends or families. These are what we call kindergarten level of fear. And there are many, thousands, millions in the Buddhist world who takes refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha because of this fear. I'm very sure. Somewhere in Bhutan, somewhere in Myanmar, somewhere in Laos, there are, like farmers, there are businessmen who take refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha because of this level. Now, as I said this, I'm not looking down at this fear, even though I have to use this sort of, demeaning, I don't know, like kindergarten level. In fact, we will also, many masters, all masters would encourage that. Yes, at the moment, their fear is a very diluted, short-sighted, kindergarten level of fear, but because the object to whom they are taking refuge is sublime, perfect, somehow, one way or another, this object will teach these people to have a better fear. You understand? Like that kind of attitude. Okay, so that's one. Then we have the sort of the school, higher school level of fear. That is actually quite interesting. That is the fear of samsara. I'm fed up with this, like this cyclic existence. I'm fed up with my clinging to myself, which produces so much emotion. I get so entangled with these emotions. Then I act upon it, something based on these emotions. And this action leads to more thinking, more the reaction, and I'm getting entangled and I suffer, so on and so forth. And then the concept of rebirth, all of that. So I suffer, and I'm afraid of the cause of the suffering and the result of the suffering both. I don't want to go round and round with this cyclic existence. I'm afraid of this cyclic existence. This is the second level of fear. It's very sophisticated. And then the highest level of the fear is not only afraid of the samsara, but also for the sake of communication, afraid of nirvana, both. Because non-duality, remember, paradoxy. Now we are talking about the paradox in the highest level, because by the time you really reach, when you have a much better understanding of things, remember, like a rainbow, it's a samsara, but it's also the nirvana. It's nirvana, but it's also the samsara. It's there, but it's also not there. So, afraid when it's there and happy when it's not there, or afraid that it's not there when it's not there and happy when it's there, both are just a game. This is ridiculous, this duality, this game that we get entangled with, this dualistic game. So that's really highest fear. Okay, so that's on the, remember I'm talking about the cause of refuge, which there are three: fear and admiration. Okay, admiration also has three levels, but I'm not going to go through that. Basically, at the end in the Mahayana, admiration to the perfection of non-duality. If you can understand the world with a view of non-duality, you gain the liberation from the entanglement of duality. And this is something that we can really admire. This is something so admirable, because this is going to release me. So that's mainly, we are talking about that admiration. Now the compassion is a very exclusive thing in the Mahayana. And this is what is taught in this Shastra. Compassion to the sentient beings. Taking refuge to Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha, not for one's own personal liberation, of course, never for the personal gain or happiness, but for the sake of the liberation of all the sentient beings. Liberation from what? Liberation from getting entangled to dualistic phenomena. This is what makes the Bodhisattvas' refuge very exclusive, so to speak. We take a break. Okay. We take a 10 minutes break.